Hi, guys, and welcome to the Incredible Hulk podcast. And today we are discussing the season one story called Earthquakes Happen.
Rawr.
This follows a little tradition of some of the stories that came out in the first season, mostly, of the disaster movie type story. So this one, of course, is about earthquakes, which utilizes some footage from the film Earthquake as well. So they did, as we know, use quite a lot of stock footage to compensate for budget. Anyway, it stars, of course, Bill Bixby as David Banner, Lou Ferrigno as the Incredible Hulk, and Jack Colvin as Mr. McGee. Co-starring Sherry Jackson as Dr. Diane Joseph, Gary Wood as Turner, and Peter Brandon as Ted Hammond. And to talk with me about this story, please welcome Sue and Alex. How are you both?
All right, how are you?
Great, thanks, Alex. Yeah.
Oh, good. Rawr. Glad to be back.
Yeah. So let's kick it off. This David is very cool and quite manipulative in this one, in a good way for his own reasons. It's quite an intriguing opening, really, because he makes a call to this Dr. Patterson, who walks with a cane over to the phone, which will play into this later on. And David is posing as this guy called Ted Hammond, whom you mentioned earlier, at this research facility, testing seismic shifts and so on that cause earthquakes. And he's on his way there. So he's actually going to pose as Patterson. So he rang up, posing as this guy, and asked Patterson to delay his trip for the inspection visit to the facility there, so he can be there when to greet him. So anyway, Patterson agrees, hangs up, and there's a funny bit here, guys, you may want to talk about, where David goes to this store with this lady there to actually purchase some fake ID.
Yeah, it's strange, but I guess they're going on the idea that in California, especially in the Los Angeles area, you can go to a store and buy just about anything. You can get forged documents or whatever. But apparently he looked cool enough because she looked like she was almost ready to pull the plug on him a couple times, and then he's like, she said, okay, it's going to be $100 instead of 75, which apparently had been their original, price for these documents. And he had told her that he was robbed, and then he instead of accepting these at the higher price, he gives her this withering look like, oh, this is not going to go well for you. And, probably in his head is, saying his catchphrase, don't make me angry, lady. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. But anyway, he gives her this withering look and pushes the documents back to her and starts to walk out the door. And she says, oh, okay. And so then he's like, yeah, I don't want to get robbed. And and suddenly she looks sheepish. But I mean, talk about being manipulative. I mean, and talk about like the old little story about Los Angeles, that you can pretty much buy anything at any store in the city, especially in these little teeny tiny rinky-dink stores. You're amazed what you can do. Anyway, that's that bit.
So David eventually gets to he gets the documents, pays the price that he originally agreed on. All's well there, and he heads to the facility. And now he's in a snappy suit and he's wearing a pair of specs, posing as Dr. Patterson, when he's got his little ID badge on. Now he's doing something pretty daring here, getting into this complex and posing as someone else. It's not something you see Banner do very often, being that cunning. It's quite an intriguing setup, really.
And almost immediately he sees McGee when he walks through the gate.
Yeah, he's there with the press and that, talking to Ted Hammond about what they're doing in there, what stuff they test and that, But he narrowly avoids him and ducks behind a car, I think, a parked car.
Well, he sort of does. He does it first, and then McGee senses that something's wrong, but the security guard's sort of protecting him.
Yeah, he sort of helps. He finds him there, and he said, "What are you doing?" Kind of like, "Who are you?" Loitering, and he explains it's Dr. Patterson. We've been expecting you. Yeah, so he kind of guides the way into there without being hassled, narrowly avoiding McGee, who's trying to get up there to talk to him, but gets pulled back. So anyway, they do manage to get into the building safely, and David's met by the real Ted Hammond, who he was impersonating on the phone. And there's a slight bit of tension here when the reception says, "Could you please sign your name on here, sir?" And there's this like anxious pause. And as he's walking away, she goes, "Excuse me," and stops him. And then says, "You have to wear this little, what was it? Little radioactive counter or something."
Yeah, radiation meter. Well, I don't think he meant the real doctor. I think the thing is, he was able to fool another doctor there, but the woman doctor is sensing something's wrong because David keeps saying, "Yes, I read it," or "I got it," or "That's how I remember the letter because you sent it to me," or whatever. When that's somewhat plausible, but, probably would have said, "Oh, just like the letter you sent me," or something to that effect. So she senses that he's not the real article. And then
she's got a suspicion
later on,
straight away.
Yeah, later on in the story, she reads his file and realizes that he's a lot older. He has an artificial knee and a cane. So I guess David didn't, really plan it out that well.
No.
But again, I understand he doesn't want to be the monster, but at the same point, it's the monster in an ironic way that saves him in so many, situations. So he's being very, very, very selfish here, not to mention criminal, of impersonating somebody else, lying, sort of stealing their identity, walking around with, forged stuff. You'd think that he'd realize, maybe I should find a doctor who's willing to help me and not try to do all this myself.
It's interesting that Hammond it actually believes that Dr. Joseph's design for the facility is not completely safe, and so he's kind of glad that David's there to sort of give it a safety check. He's a little bit suspicious of her, and he doesn't quite trust the fact that this place is like safe from any kind of like seismic shifts or anything like that. Just the infrastructure. So David ends up looking at the plans of the facility, and he spots the fact that there's a gamma lab in there, which of course is where he wants to head to, for obvious reasons, to kind of like hopefully cure himself, reverse the.
And he has this flashback of him with the woman who was, I can't. She's been in so much stuff.
Susan Sullivan.
Yeah, Susan Sullivan. She and kind of cool to see the flashback from that episode.
Yeah, sort of saying, it's like echoing the words, like use a reversal to counteract the gamma rays or something like that, she says. And it
Yeah, yeah,
echoes around in his head. He thinks, maybe this might work, Um,
yeah. And Alex was, doing the whole joke when they first walk in.
Oh yeah, yeah. That old joke that they do on so many movie parody shows. Doctor, 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 or the golf clap. The golf
oh,
clap.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All the doctors. Doctor, meet doctor.
Doctor, doctor. Yeah. So yeah. So I mean, and that's the other thing that he's. But of course, the other irony is that this is sort of a fun twist on the disaster movie because obviously not only is he in a locked room underground with the gamma rays all by himself again, but then somehow when he turned it off and on, it sort of helped activate the plant and an earthquake at the same.
No, it didn't activate the.
I know it gives the impression that it did though, and the other, yeah, and the other guy said that even though he was wrong, he said it activated the earthquake as well.
No,
But
that's bad timing.
I
It's
know.
California.
I know, but it's a TV movie we're talking about, so or whatever. So yeah, so of course they use the stock footage from the earthquake movie, and of course, almost everything either looks too wobbly or somehow the buildings come right apart, which I don't think that. Of course, I haven't been in an earthquake area, so I don't know if it would.
6.9 can do a lot of damage,
Right.
but usually buildings don't disintegrate.
Yeah, they showed some scenes where it looked like
breaking in half and things like that, weren't
Yeah, well, almost like the top
they?
half had broken off and stuff.
Oh, the bit with the bell, with the bell thing, and
Yeah, the bell
the
tower
thing
broke
split in
apart.
half and that, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of as much as I love the show, that is a little silly sometimes.
Yeah, if that had survived the 1906 earthquake
Yeah,
of 8.3 on the Richter scale,
yeah,
there's no way.
yeah. I mean, it wouldn't, And the other thing too is, the fact that it it's the fact that in the Incredible Hulk, everything's like grand mal, shaking and convulsing and violent and stuff like that. And as you look in the episode, I mean, the ceiling's supposed to be caving in, but it doesn't always look realistic.
Yeah,
But
thanks.
yeah, so I mean, it's a cute idea, but some of it's a little bit overdone.
So this is where we kind of get the lead up to him going into the gamma lab, because he's like walking around and she's escorting him around the levels and stuff, Dr. Joseph. And he's got like his big floor plan thing he's sort of studying. And she's suspicious now, and she wants to go and check. She's saying to herself she wants to go and check his ID out, his security stuff. So she goes. She says, "Wait there," and she goes to her phone. Says, get me the security thing on Dr. Patterson. Something not right about him, And so she makes a ruse, like a little thing, like a distraction thing, for someone to call her on the intercom down there to say she has to be dragged away to check something, just to see what he's up to while he's unattended, And of course, the suspicions are right. Ultimately, he does snoop around, and he has got an ulterior motive. So she goes off, and he, of course, there was quite a little clever bit here where he's always resourceful, David,
Yeah.
And he sees the level 4 door which he needs to get into, and these two girls come out of it, and just as they go, he hurls a broom at the door, which just stops it from shutting.
Well, yeah. In other words, it's like I can't. I'm not sure if
break in with the axe.
I know it's like a secret code. It's a secret code not only for the diversion, but to alert the plant that something's wrong. But then the two girls come out, and it's very funny because it's very jaded dialogue. I mean, at one point, one girl says to the other girl, oh, I don't know about this, and the other woman says, oh, let's keep it that way, or something to that effect. And then they start talking like they're talking about people to date as they're walking, past him, which I thought was kind of interesting in the, Incredible Hulk TV show, where they said, oh, just come up with any dialogue that sounds tough. Not that it makes any sense to the story or anything. And then he uses like an emergency axe or whatever to kind of, block the, yeah, well, not only that, but luckily the women opened it, so he doesn't need to break the door open, but he's trying to jam it so that he can, walk through it. That he doesn't have to go through the, the process of breaking the door again. And I kind of went, wow, that's a little desperate and incredibly lucky that nobody heard it, nobody saw it, and that he was able to perfectly maneuver it so that the door wouldn't lock.
Yeah, it was a really good aim he had. You can see it like going across the ground, like looks like the camera's bolted to it, and you see the view of it on the ground, hurtling towards the door, the broom handle.
Yeah, so that was very lucky that the door wasn't strong enough to break the broom. Ironically,
yeah. So anyway, I mean, all that aside, because obviously it's artistic, license, if it were, he's got to get in there somehow. So that's what they use. So he does get in, and he makes his way to level 4, where this gamma chamber is, which he's hoping will reverse the effects of his radiation poisoning, and that triggers the Hulk. Meantime, suspicions were right, because Diane comes back with Ted and the security guy Paul, and realizes he's not where she left him, and so they split up and search, and that's when as you said earlier on, Alex, that he powers up the thing, which ultimately causes some problems, and makes his way into the chamber and sets it, like it does all the setup and everything, and it's got a countdown for about.
Yeah, and it looked instead of looking like a nuclear power plant, it looked like a nuclear experimentation station, and that's
the thing he's under, the thing he sits on. It's like it's actually like a laser beam thing, isn't it? It's a gamma laser that shoots out. So I'm assuming that I mean. I saw later on. You see the power of that laser, the trouble it causes, and you think, if that thing's going to come at him, wouldn't it fry him? It's like burning holes in the ground when it hits something. So I don't know what would have happened there had he activated that thing. So anyway, he's hoping to, as usual, to cure himself, but it obviously, as always, goes horribly wrong. And Diane enters. And she powers down. She switches off, and the guys in the control room are seeing this and going, "What's going on here?" Maybe it's part of the inspection, but they're not quite sure. But of course, it's caused a lot of problems. What he did, and anyway, she powers down. He's very, disgruntled about that, and she says, "Do you know what you're doing?" And he says, "Believe me, I do," And at that moment, guys, it's when the room starts shaking.
Yep, the first earthquake happens.
Causes the earthquake.
6.9 on the Richter scale.
Which is pretty heavy. Yeah.
And being in a California thing, they have pictures of traffic. And they have pictures of the highway collapsing, and buildings collapsing, and David gets pinned under something, and he transforms.
Yeah, that laser thing, the gamma thing that he was working with, activates, doesn't it? And it starts like shooting, shooting like bolts out, as I said earlier. I mean, I can't think what would happen if it hit him, because this thing's like, causing a fire almost in the room. It's blowing holes in the ground and everything, and it's close to where Diane is, because she's fallen unconscious, he's trapped under this computer bank, and this laser's getting nearer to her, and that's when it causes him to change, you know. And the other guys that were there earlier, like Ted Hammond and so on, are trapped in the room next door to them. A couple of them are under debris in that. So they're screaming out for help. The Hulk ends up wrecking the laser.
Rawr!
And hears them calling from next door, and he starts sort of ripping open this metal door that's separating them, you know, before he changes back to David again, and he stays with Diane.
And then he gets changed back into David, and he puts on a lab coat.
Yeah, there was a couple of spares there, weren't there? And he even finds a spare pair of shoes as well.
Right.
And they fit exactly.
Yeah, the thing is that was cool was that it actually lended more credence to his being there as this other guy, Patterson.
It looks more like a sort of like a hospital orderly coat. It's like a short sleeve thing, isn't it?
Well, it's a California lab coat. It's not a full length, you know, cool British lab coat. It's a short, sort of like a blazer length lab coat that they have in Cali.
It's probably because of the hot weather.
Yep.
And so
And I mean, it's not short sleeve, but it isn't as long as the ones in England for sure.
Yeah.
The thing about England is the thing about the UK that's so cool is that everybody who's anybody is wearing a long coat, you know.
Yeah.
It's just the way it goes. It's like it's the thing with the UK. Anyway, he looks all professional again.
Yeah.
And so the only trouble is that all these aftershocks are starting to endanger the city, because they can't, when some of the things were powered down, some of the circuitry, they can't stop the coolant gets stuck or something like that.
That's right. Yeah. It's
and there's a
cooling system to the reactor or something, which would actually cause like a major catastrophe if it doesn't work properly. Yeah. So they've only got.
So not only is this a earthquake disaster show, it's a nuclear disaster show too.
Yeah, because the place would have to be evacuated. There could be a radiation leak, all that kind of thing. You know, so it's gone from one extreme to another. You know, it could cause absolute chaos, pandemonium. You know.
Yeah.
So there's a real jeopardy here. You know that they're in life or death situation, but not just for them, but for thousands of people in the city and that. So every time these tremors happen, it's just making matters worse and worse.
Yes.
They managed to get into the other room where the other little party are, and the whole place is completely turned upside down in there. And the security guard Paul has had his leg is fractured or something, and it's quite interesting.
Yep.
David really is is a man of plans here. You know, he's quick on his feet, because he just finds like a makeshift splint for him out of like computer readout paper and these like what bendy wire things, the tape things they used to use in big computers, and straps him up. It straps his leg up. It's very, he's full of ingenuity, David, isn't he? Yeah.
Well, I mean, he was a good medical doctor before he started his life of his transient life anyway.
Yeah, yeah. He certainly knows a few ways of getting around stuff and that. Yeah. So they give him like a temporary splint, kind of helps, it straightens his leg a bit,
Yep.
which is really cool. They're all helping each other to try and move the debris to find a way out, and so they all have to pull together.
And then there's this heat up of the nuclear pile, and they send these helicopters out, and another shot of traffic and a shot of helicopter overhead, and a sound effect of somebody in the distance with a loudspeaker disseminating information. And then
Oh, that's another thing. Also, Turner, the guy that's in there with them, it takes an instant disliking to David, doesn't he?
yeah,
Because he finds out that he's been messing around, why David was down there, and so you're the cause of this. And at one point, he lunges at him almost, he's going to attack him, but gets pulled away by by Hammond and that. But he really is very bitter towards David in this,
yeah.
So because we find out, that this water cooler thing is, really, really damaged, and
Yeah, they keep trying to turn it on, and David and the doctor and the other two down, Hammond and what's his name,
Turner.
and Turner are listening along this sort of piping tube.
Yeah, they
And
go down.
they're-
They go down into the depths of the place, don't they? Down where all these pipes are and that. Yeah, yeah.
Well, they just ripped off the screen on one of the walls, and they're looking into along these pipes, and they decide that if they can walk down this pipes, that maybe they could escape. The trouble is like they're cement wall between a reinforced cement wall between the pipes and the outside. So they got a problem there for sure. And
Oh
then
yeah.
and then David and the other two try to turn on the water that they hear can't be turned on, and it's the nozzle is so hot, and they pull the two fellas pull back, and David is gets burned by the heat on the nozzle.
Yeah, the steam comes out, doesn't it? It's released, and it blows the other two back outside again. And David's still down there trying to open the valve, and and of course the steam pressure comes out and engulfs him.
Yep.
And
he burns his hands, and then he gets burned by the steam, and then he transforms again.
He does indeed, yeah. And of course, with the Hulk strength, of course, he manages to open up the valve
and saves the reactor.
And saves the day. Saves the whole thing. Really saves everyone in LA. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
That's a mean feat.
And and then also he forces his way through the wall.
That's right. Giving them a way out. Yeah. So that's really cool as well. Yeah. So they can manage to be able to escape. Which is good. And off he goes. He's done his, he does his great turn as always, as we know.
Yep, that was cool.
So what was the little end bit here, Sue or Alex? There was a little epilogue at the end where McGee's back there again. I was just You know, curious for all this earthquake thing. Where did McGee go?
He was outside,
So what?
standing around.
He's standing around. But why didn't he fall through a gap in the ground or anything like that? You know.
I don't know. And why didn't he go, like, investigate the earthquake?
Yeah.
Because he's got a one-track mind.
He's only interested in the Hulk. Yeah.
Once he heard about the Hulk being in there,
That was it.
there was no way he was going to go look at the earthquake or anything.
Yeah. He's not interested in all the damage that caused, or if there was people dead or anything. He's like, oh, the Hulk was here. All right, where is he? Yeah.
Yep.
But she does say, because they say there was a stranger there as well. You know, obviously they didn't say it was David. His name was David. They didn't know anyway. But just as well because for McGee. But they did say, and I don't know I don't think that actually made him feel any different about the Hulk. But they did say, that well, they didn't know the Hulk did, actually got them out of there. They didn't see him, but they said with the help of, David as Patterson, if it wasn't for him, they'd all be dead. You know.
Yep.
So there you go. But that didn't I don't think he kind of. It might have been a very momentary food for thought for McGee, but I don't think that really sort of made him feel much different about the Hulk.
Right,
It is very early stages in this series. At this point, he doesn't. He still thinks that the Hulk's a murderer.
Right, and then David is I bet you the next day when the real Patterson shows up, they're going to be like, what the heck? Who is that? And then maybe.
But they knew though, didn't they? They knew that he wasn't Patterson, didn't they? Because they did the security check, so they knew he was an imposter.
Right, but when the real one comes, they could at least have somebody there to congratulate for being a hero or whatever, all this stuff.
So hopefully, if they do open, I don't know whether they were going to reopen the place or not, but I think they do need to look at this, their safety. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, it was cute. I think they could have done it better, and they did manage to work in some, disaster movie type of thing, which was the craze, back in America after all the spy stuff and all that had worn its welcome out. I actually thought that the actors weren't really. They seemed very tired in the way that they were reading their lines too, just as they were getting in the ambulance. It's kind of like I would have liked the show more if they had kind of said, "Oh well, we're laid off right now" or whatever. Back to the drawing board or whatever. It just seemed kind of the bad acting toward the end. I did actually like the reporter yelling at McGee going, "Come on, we're going after a real story. We're trying to tell a real story." So I kind of thought that was funny how he outacted like 6 people in like a minute. It's like, okay, guys, was it really that grueling to be, technically on a set? I mean, I know you guys had a lot of lines, but, depends
how many times they have to read them, I guess.
But I mean, it's kind of funny how the reporter outacted everybody. So there's always been a little bit of fear, I guess, even though France uses a lot of nuclear power and Japan does and a lot of other countries do. There's always been this American type of fear of nuclear power plants, even though there's science behind it. It's not just, any old buddy. But in most cases, there's supposed to be a coolant, there's supposed to be a backup system, there's supposed to be measures that make sure that things don't leak and explode. And
of course they have to have not only like plan B, but they've got to have plan C, D, E, and all that. The things like that. Yeah,
which it also seems kind of weird too that some sort of gamma ray explosion or mishap and an earthquake take this power plant down to 40% or whatever. When in real life it wouldn't be that bad right away.
Mm.
So I think that was feeding into the there's some sort of fear. I think it's also because it's nuclear, that it's not something that you can, it's not like a fire where you can eventually find some sort of method to cool it down in most cases. So
Well,
where,
that was Earthquakes Happen, guys. So thank you, Sue and Alex, for joining me on it.
Sure thing. It was great. Rawr.
And incidentally, guys, following this little chat we've just had here, if you stick around in a moment, I recorded an interview with producer Chuck Bowman, and Chuck is, or was rather, the series producer of the whole of season 1. So, or one of 2 or 3 of them that were, right through. So he's going to share his memories of working on the series as a producer and what that involved. So please, stick around for that in a moment. And thanks again, guys, for joining me on this one. It's been groovy, as they say.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was fun talking about it.
Yeah, don't be afraid of nuclear power or earthquakes. I mean, they're all just disasters waiting to happen.
And on that lovely note,
Yeah.
I picked a particular episode that we've reviewed for this one, which was the season 1 story, Earthquakes Happen, and maybe Chuck will touch upon that story as well as we go along. But really, it's kind of like an overview of season 1, because my guest was none other than the producer of that whole season. So it's a good, nice, rare insight into how a season would have operated back then, from someone who was actually hands-on. So I'd like to welcome my guest who's going to talk about this. It's none other than Chuck Bowman. How are you, Chuck?
Just fine. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome, Chuck. Let's talk about, firstly, the role of producer. How did you land the job for the Incredible Hulk?
Well, I had been an associate producer, then producer on a series called Ball Black Sheep with Robert Conrad. It's a World War II setting story about Pappy Boynton, Marine flyer in World War II. And anyway, when that series ended, it just so happened that I had met Ken Johnson through Steve Cannell. They were friends, both creators and executive producers there. And I also was working with Ken's fiancée, Susan Appling, on Baba. And we had a conversation about this new thing that Ken was doing. And I had kept up with his career over the months prior. And we had dinner one night, and Ken offered me the job as supervising producer on the show. And I was thrilled with it. I was a big fan of Bill Bixby, and I had long time admiration for Ken Johnson's writing, producing, and directing. And as a matter of fact, the first thing I did was screen the pilot. Susan Sullivan played the love interest for Bill Bixby on that. And at that time, I thought that was just about as perfect and well-told story as I had seen on television, considering the types of story structures and how things were shot. And I thought Ken was extremely creative. So I was pleased that he asked me to come aboard. And very frankly, I was terribly inexperienced on mounting a show of that size. But Ken was such a wonderful and patient mentor, not only to me, but to his whole writing staff. And he brought people on board that didn't have a great deal of experience, and he schooled all of us on how this process works and how it works best for him as the head of the project. And that's how it came down. I always marveled at how well he handled stories and developing stories. And so, the credit to the Incredible Hulk not only goes to Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno, but Ken Johnson, who was just masterful, I thought, at the time.
Absolutely. And just thinking about the pilot episode there, Chuck, that you mentioned, the very first story, how amazingly well it still holds up.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And by the way, I've worked with Susan Sullivan since, and, you know, she's had a long and storied and successful career. Matter of fact, she's still working on a series with Michael Douglas, and it's called, he plays a teacher at an acting school. I'll think of it. But, and she's always wonderful. She's solid and she's ready to work. And I told her, I don't know how many times, how much I admired her as the lead female on the Incredible Hulk pilot.
Yeah, she was great in that. She really was a standout in that. The way her and Bix just works, you know, the camera, you know, their chemistry was brilliant in it, you know.
Yes, it was. Yes.
And it shows in every scene. Now, how can you talk us through sort of like, I wouldn't imagine there's an average day in this kind of job, but, you know, because anything can kind of like, you know, happen. But, what would have been the role of the producer for you in that season, Chuck? What would have been your, you know, your, duties and so on?
My input. Well, primarily the producer, and it can vary from show to show, but the producer, or line producer, or supervising producer, in you know, in the way I held that title at that time, was pretty much responsible for watching after the budget, and when things went wrong, trying to figure out how to make things right again without it, you know, breaking the bank along the way, and that's really quite a gratifying and creative thing to do, is try to, when things aren't going, and it's the same when I direct, of course, when things fall apart, the challenge is, when you try to fix it, is to fix it so it's better than what it was originally planned. That's kind of like we were doing on the Incredible Hulk as we went along. So that was the first thing I do when I show up in the morning, is review where the company is shooting and what elements they're shooting, whether they've got pyrotechnics or stunts, etc. And if it's something that I needed to tend to on the set, then I would go wherever we were shooting, either on a local location or at the stage, and just kind of watch and answer questions and make sure everything is running smoothly. And then we're into dailies, generally right afternoon, and seeing all the previous day's work, and again, making adjustments, asking questions, talking to the editors there. That was more Ken's role than mine at that time. And then we were often going into casting sessions in the afternoon, after dailies, 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and depending on the number of people we were looking for to cast in a show. And one of the things that impressed me so much, Ken Johnson is a talent in many ways, but one of the talents is as an actor. So he always read the other parts of the lead in an episode when he was reading with an actress. And the advantage of that, of course, is that he could, add juice, add energy to it. Sometimes if the casting person or somebody else in the room is reading with an actor or an actress, if their energy isn't at the right level, then the actor or actress who's there reading for the part, they could lose some of that energy as well. But it always worked well with Ken because of what he brought to the table.
I was just thinking that, Chuck, that some people have a great knack of casting the right people. You know, Whether that's a gut instinct or whether that's because he was an actor previously or whatever it might be, they seem to have that kind of, gift,
Yes, and by the way, I think you nailed it. I think it's partially a gift. It's part talent. It's part intellect. It's part feeling of responsibility for what you're doing. Ken was really good at it, and by the way, it's a process that I picked up on as I moved on throughout my career. I was very sensitive about how successful we could allow visiting or guest actors and actors reading for parts. Make sure they had everything going for them that we could possibly offer them, so they had a chance of success.
So, generally speaking, for the castings sessions in the Hulk, Chuck, would the actors be called in to read a scene, or would they do a to video audition as well, or anything like that?
No, typically we'd pick scenes for each character. Maybe an actor would be in 3 scenes, maybe in 5 scenes, maybe in 2, even in 1 if it was an important piece. And we'd make sure the casting director got that to them, and the casting director would often kind of give them an idea of what we were looking for in that character. And when they came into the room, the first thing we asked them is, do you have any questions about this? Or we would say, we want to give you, some heads up on what's going on in this scene that you may not know. And then we'd leave it up to the actor to continue asking questions, or oftentimes, an actor or actress would, read the scene or perform the scene and then ask for notes, and then they would like to read it again. And we were always extremely flexible with that. We always tried to make the ambience in the room as warm and conducive to being successful as we possibly could. And that's not always the case. Oftentimes, in casting sessions like that, the producers, directors, so forth, show impatience, and certainly the actors feel that tension. So some of them work with it just fine, others not so successfully. But then after we go through casting sessions, we generally look at episodes that were already completed, and then give notes to the editor, and that always that's the way we would finish the day if we had major problems and we needed some help from the tower. Otherwise, all the way up to Frank Price, who was running Universal Television at that time. He was always available to us if we had problems that needed real muscle behind solving. And we would generally go through that. It was often a 12, 14-hour day. We didn't mind it. We were in show business,
Yeah.
We all loved it.
You kind of get wrapped up in it, yeah.
One of the things about Ken, and something, a trait that Steve Cannell had in abundance was, golly, aren't we lucky we're here? They never took it for granted. And I always appreciated that.
Yeah. As the role of the producer, Chuck, would that involve you being on set for the recording of all the episodes or some of them?
For some of them, depending on what was going to happen and how it was going on set. If we had anything that you could refer to as friction, or crew problems and all that, I'd try to go handle that. But, again, it was generally local locations or at the studio, so I wasn't far from them. So whatever was needed, I'd generally get that first call and try to dive into the situation and solve the problem before it had to move on or create delays in production. We could not have delays in production. So we had to keep going.
Yeah. What stories in the season stood out for you particularly, Chuck?
Well, as I told you, the pilot was just something else. And again, Ken, and by the way, it's been so damn many years ago, I'm not sure how much, I certainly don't have detail on each of the stories.
No.
What it always impressed me was, again, how good Ken would take the writers down the road of the Incredible Hulk and Bill Bixby and what life was like out there for Bill, who's, chasing, trying to get away from Colvin, who was in pursuit of him. I mean, it's kind of like The Fugitive, who was around a few years before that. People on the run. And Bill was on the run, and one of the things I liked that Ken put into this series was everything would change for Bill's character week to week. He'd be in a different part of the country, working to survive and trying to stay ahead of those who were in pursuit. Any particular episode, I can't recall right now.
There was one in particular that we're discussing on here for this edition, and that was a story called "Earthquakes Happen," which is quite an unusual title, actually. Earthquakes Happen, but it was towards the end of the season, Chuck, and it involved it was like a take on the disaster movie. They did something similar with 747, where it had the emergency on board the plane.
Yes.
The 747.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was around the time in the 70s where a lot of these disaster movies were kind of the in thing, if you like,
Yes.
And I think the Hulk always kind of reflected the times it was in, obviously,
Yeah, of course, the Hulk character was the guy that don't make me mad, you wouldn't like it. When I'm mad, however that line read for Bill. But it's kind of a reflection of the audience. Here's something and it's overwhelming, and I've got to solve the problem, and I get myself cranked up and I dive into whatever is facing you in life, whatever crisis that is. I see that, of course, in storytelling since the beginning of time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And we had some wonderful sets that we used.
Well, particularly the one for the earthquake one was a very elaborate set.
The outbreak. Yeah.
Yeah. The earthquake one. Yeah.
Oh yes.
Because I know some of it was obviously studio sets, but there was a huge building that was used in it where Bill goes into, supposed to be like a nuclear testing facility or something. I have no idea, Chuck, where that would have been shot, but it was obviously a real building,
One of the things that we had the advantage of there at Universal is we had a lot of extra second unit footage that had been shot for features that is shot there, including Earthquake. When we did a story on Bill on the Road, we used some of the extra footage that came out of Steven Spielberg's Duel motion picture.
That's right. Yes.
And, Yeah, and by the way, once we did that, they slammed the door on using stock footage from the movies out there, and particularly anything that Spielberg was involved with. And frankly, I understood that. I mean, we used it, but it wasn't my option to use it or not to use it. So I stayed in the background, but that was the end of it. You won't see that in any other shows, any other episodes. And of course, it's all dated now, but that was quite an impressive piece of work that Spielberg did on Deal.
Oh, I mean, the camera work was amazing on that. Right? The techniques he used, to lock the camera onto the vehicle and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was very, very clever.
And those rigs were big and imposing in those days. I mean, when we used Panavision cameras, of course, and they're huge, and so all of those camera mounts on cars, and we didn't have green screen very effective at that time. So we shot everything, live, and they were huge rigs. I mean,
they were, yeah.
But you can do all that. You can do most of that now, of course, on stage with green screen.
Sort of like that film was around the time, of course, of the trucker films like Convoy and stuff like that, wasn't it?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
So again, it was kind of like reflecting what was kind of, the big thing at the time in the theaters. Like the road movies, the Convoy, the disaster films, all that sort of thing, So the Hulk you did your own kind of take of that Hulk style,
That's right. Yeah. Again, that was done in meetings with the writers and how to conform all that, how we could get our hands on that to, back up the footage we'd have to shoot live.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, would you be involved with location scouting as well, or at any point?
Oh, absolutely. I'd go on location scouts.
Yeah.
That was important because access and again, how speedy could we work at a practical location? So our team was used to that pretty quickly and understood what our limitations were. And, but Ken again came up with some marvelous ideas for, locations. I mean, we were up in the mountains in the snow. We were, in big, huge draining process plants, down by LAX, and it was pretty smelly. But boy, it looked good on film.
Oh, it did, yeah. It definitely had the right atmosphere. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was hard on both Bill and Lou when, we were shooting in the early morning or we were shooting again up in the hills or up in the mountains. It'd be quite cold and Bill would have to take off his shirt, and boy, did he hate to take off that shirt. But Ferrigno, of course, was running around shirtless and barefoot.
Yeah.
And green paint all over him. So he had an enormous amount of patience in doing that. And Lou was such a great choice for that character because with his hearing problems, he looked at people so intently, which was great for that Hulk character.
Oh yeah, 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 remarkable. I mean, and considering that still, and I think he probably always will be now, in the annals of history, the only Hulk that was played by a real actor. I mean, what I mean is like a real, organic person, not a computer generated one,
Yes, that's right. What a lot of people don't know is that, just a second, hang on. I'm being distracted here. Yeah, is that Lou was the obvious choice. I mean, we read a lot of people, even the former governor of California was read. He was always competitor with Lou in the Mr. America.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Competitions, and he would work over Lou a lot, and they eventually. But anyway, he read and acted, and he was shorter than Lou, and Lou was just more imposing. And again, I think Lou's acting skills, what his limitations for hearing, actually added to give him skills and insight into playing this character.
Yeah, and I've often said on these shows, Chuck, how you see, the fact that he was not an actor when he started as the Hulk.
That's right.
He comes straight from the bodybuilding world, and was just really booked initially, probably for his size and stuff. But you can really see over those 4 or 5 years of the Hulk how he develops as an actor. He gets better and better as he goes along, Yeah. And it was wonderful.
His stunt man was a black actor, Manny. I can't think of Manny's last name right now, but who has gone on to be a stunt coordinator and an extremely successful second unit director. He's worked both for me and for my son Rob over the years, and is exemplary in his skill and talent as a second unit director. Great eye, and has a great family too.
Yeah, the man, you think it was Manny Perry?
That's him.
Manny Perry, yeah.
And God, what a beautiful body he had. Not quite as tall as Lou, and not quite as wide, but you put green paint on him and set the camera down low with the wide lens, and he's every bit as impressive as Lou.
Yeah.
Terrific guy. Terrific.
Yeah. Were there any particular challenges for you during the first season?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, other than just getting, the crew, the shooting crew, lighting, camera and all that, just settled into it. It always takes a number of episodes for things to settle in to a routine, and for the people on set to understand what the people in the offices are looking for. And again, Ken was the guy that made sure that we didn't stray from his concept of what the Hulk could do and could not do. So that was the primary thing in the first year. I mean, I thought we always did a pretty good job in casting, and so there were some fine performances there.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, many.
But, after the first or second season, it's pretty routine.
Yeah, you settle into it, I guess. There is a certain format to it. It can be. I mean, it is kind of formulaic, but because it's the same. He arrives somewhere, he gets involved in something, and then he goes on the road and leaves again on his own. So there's a certain formula to it, but it's what you do within
kind of
that.
Like Route 66 with a big green guy.
Yeah, that's it. Now, you. I'm interested in this, Chuck, because you went from being the producer of the show to a director and writer of it.
Yes.
And the first story that you directed was season 2.
Escape from Los Santos.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, when you're first of all, how did you go from being the producer to the director of it?
Well, again, somebody upstairs has to okay that. But I had done, a lot of directing of industrial films, and I came out of television news, and I'd done a number of documentaries, things of that nature, though none of those were, of course, in the same format or formulas as directing narrative. It was getting the green light from Ken Johnson to do that. Now, the story of that first episode that I directed was something, because I was terrified. And I can remember a car picked me up the first morning of shooting. And as I got in the car, and I'd done all the prep the previous weeks, I'd gone through all the stages and all the casting, and you know, I was pretty organized. But every time that car stopped at a light or at a stop sign, I had my hand on the door handle. I wanted to jump out and run away. And this is not uncommon. I mean, I think all the way from Steven Spielberg to any director you want to talk to will tell you the same thing. You know, you're overwhelmed. However, the response to that is when you pull up on set and you step out of that car or off that truck, you are besieged by people asking you questions. And once you're into that, you forget all the anxiety. All you are now is just making sure things are in place for you to get going.
Yeah.
And you know, it helps if you know, you have a good star to you know, understand you're doing your first. And that was an interesting experience with Bixby. I had cast the female lead in that was Shelley Fabares. And I must say I had a terrible crush on Shelley Fabares in those days. And I don't think I found anything at all wrong with her performance. She was wonderful. And I think Paul Peterson was also in that episode. But we had a good time, and we shot it, you know, a lot of it out near the area that where we shot Baba Black Sheep. It's on the outskirts of Los Angeles County, out in rather dusty and windy areas. So it was an interesting place to be. But had a good time though. Had a good time. Again, I don't want to go through that again and anything else I do in life, because it really humbles you to know that you can't take the wrong turn here, because it's the domino effect. And after a while you'll say, how the hell did I get here? And you've got to work your way and solve the problems back to the beginning of the horse race. And I had a great time with it. It kind of launched me into my years as a director and producer. I enjoyed it all.
Do you remember the scene where it's toward the end of it, Chuck, where you've got the dilemma where David and the girl are on that rope bridge, or that cable bridge that's going across one side of the mountain to the other, mm-hmm. and the police are on one end and they're on the other, and and it's like, it's tension. Do you remember the sort of setting up that scene, and was it difficult to shoot that?
No, I think that we'd worked that out carefully before I ever got there, and the day and two before, we had made sure everything worked. As I recall, we had created that bridge to match some stock footage we had to sell it for the danger that was implied there.
Yeah.
But something like that we've spent so much time on, and all you got to do the day of shooting is just acclimate your actors to what you want them to do and where you want them to be, so they can match some of the stock that you may or may not use.
So obviously they just have to emote to the camera and pretend that they're 100 feet in the air or something, when they're probably maybe 6 to 8 feet or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yep.
The power of television,
Camera tricks.
Chuck. Yeah. It's the power of television, Chuck. Yeah.
That's true. That's right.
Now, what would you say, Chuck, are the changes, both good and bad, that you've seen in filmmaking and storytelling over, say, the last 50 years or so, since you started in the business?
Well, what I've seen, of course, is a great improvement, not only in the storytelling, in the script writing. Certainly, the production values have improved immensely since we were shooting. We can do more in special effects. The equipment, the gear is smaller, lighter. You can move with it easier. Somebody said, well, back in John Ford's day of directing, he never moved the camera, and directors today move the camera all the time, and it's distracting. Well, it may be distracting at times. It can be overused, of course. But, and chatting with my son, who's been a director since he was 22 years old, he said, yeah, but Dad, can you imagine what John Ford would have done with the camera gear that we have today if he had it then? Nobody knew better how to handle the camera and how to stage a camera and lens usage than John Ford, because that was the gear that he had at that time.
Yeah.
I thought he was masterful. Yeah. Yeah, I think all of the categories above have improved over the years. And part of it is because there's so many more outlets. And if you want to compete today, your stuff better stand out. And by the way, I think that a live Incredible Hulk actor as effective as Lou, this series could probably end up on ABC Family Channel if it were recreated today. But it's already been established there. It's now digital effect.
Yeah, very much. I think that's the only way they'll press forward with it now. It's not really.
Yes.
I don't think it could go back to being an actor again playing the Hulk.
No, not now.
No, it was all going to be computer generated now. Yeah, like it has been in all these big movies that they've made of it, in recent years. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, again, in those days we were shooting everything on film, and then we started switching over to digital. And it was tape, and then now, of course, it's all hard drives. But the capacity of these hard drives is, beyond comprehension, and it's just getting bigger. And the resolution is getting bigger. I mean, they're shooting stuff in 4K and 6K and 8K, and you can't even see it at home yet. But they're thinking correctly for the future.
Yeah.
This stuff will be seen in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. Way ahead. Yeah. So, Chuck, I want to thank you so much for chatting to me on this. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Frank. It's been a delight to reminisce a little bit about these early experiences. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been lovely to get an insight, from someone who's actually there throughout a whole season of the series. It's quite a unique thing. So I'm really happy to have chatted with you, Chuck. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you guys also for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this interview. We'll be back with another Incredible Hulk podcast very soon. So until then, guys, take care.